Existence University is committed to free minds and to the highest quality of content, and as such, we will never take government or corporate financial support. The following is brought to you by Existence University merchandise, available at the Patreon page You Exist, and also by donations through PayPal or Patreon by viewers like you. Thank you.
The key to the next revolution in physics has been hiding in plain sight for over a century. Let's find out what that key is here on Inductica.
We've been living in sin so long, all the feels are gone. Fella stopped me on the street last night, said everything's
So what is the value of keeping your mind connected to the fact, knowing what's actually the case,
It seems your meal ticket is
knowing
gone,
what's true in
and
reality?
life goes on. I could never imagine something better. Yeah, right. Now you're cooking on high heat in the middle of the street. Roller coaster, take me to a better time. Let's go. All sing your high line with the roller coaster of life. It's time to all choose your timeline on the roller coaster of life. You seem to easily forget how to place your bet. When everyday life gets you down, you gotta steal the crown. Got to own it. Don't bitch and moan about it, please. God forbid you scrape your knees, and it's nothing to sneeze at. Oh, I've told you over and over again. You gotta get both hands around it and make your own plans. Roller coaster, it's taking over, it's about time. Oh, sing your high line on the roller coaster of life. You've got to all choose your timeline with the roller coaster of life. Roller coaster. I want to go down the rabbit hole, down the rabbit hole of life. And now it's about to leave. Oh, roller coaster.
This video pairs nicely with the brand new Creaky Blinder video that just came out. You can go watch that video first and come back and watch this one, or finish this one and go watch that one. They make a great pairing for the quote-unquote nothingness of the universe.
Imagine a glass jar with a bell in it. If you shake the jar, you'll hear the bell ring. If you pump the air out of the jar, you will no longer hear it ring.
As simple as this example is presented, the actual history is a lot longer and a lot more complex. Here, let me show you with my own video. The renowned natural philosopher and father of chemistry, Robert Boyle, was conducting experiments with a vacuum chamber and air pump which he invented. Boyle used his air pump to remove air from his vacuum chamber, to which he had placed a bell which could be struck inside the chamber. Boyle discovered that it was the air that allowed for the sound of the bell, as when the air was removed from the chamber, the striking of the bell would not produce a sound. the air can be removed from the chamber, which prevents the bell sound from having a medium to travel through. Therefore, sound requires a medium of air to exist. However, air was not clearly needed for light to travel. As the chamber was made of glass, and the bell was visible inside the chamber after the air was removed. Boyle concluded that light travels through a medium made of particles so much smaller than air that they can penetrate through the glass, unlike air, and therefore cannot be vacuumed out by his air pump. Boyle also experimented with magnetism with his vacuum chamber, placing a compass needle inside, and after evacuating the air from the chamber, a magnet was moved around the glass jar, which caused the compass needle to move. Therefore, light and magnetism, whatever they may be, can travel through solids like glass, but air cannot. So light and magnetism must be smaller than air. In 1665, Dr. Robert Hooke of the Royal Society and student of Robert Boyle published his book Micrographia, which mostly contains observations he made with his invention, the microscope. The book also contains some natural philosophical explanations of what the ether and light may be. Hooke considered light to be of an exceedingly quick but very small vibrative motion, possibly having the vibration perpendicular to the direction of propagation. Hooke's ether was similar to Descartes' in a few ways, and differed drastically in many other ways. Hooke thought if light was leaving stars in particular form, then stars would have to get smaller over time, as the amount of light particles leaving the stars would leave the star with no more fire element particles after a brief period of time. Hooke, being the man that gave us the spring equation, believed that light had to travel through the universe like a bunch of springs attached to each other, such that a motion of light physically traveled through the universe, but the restoring force of the spring would return energy to the source, and therefore would not deplete the stars. Descartes' ether had sent energy through the little stuff, like energy is transferred through tightly aligned billiard balls, such that no object moved, but rather that light energy would just be the tendency to motion, whereas Hooke held that light itself was in motion. Hooke, being the student of Robert Boyle and main assistant to Boyle's experiment, had learned that sound is propagated by the medium of air, and so, like sound, light traveled in straight lines propagated in all directions with longitudinal spring-like motion, an idea that will be picked up by Christian Huygens some 30 years later, when Huygens describes light spreading in all directions in a series of waves in what he calls the luminiferous ether.
This is because sound is a wave consisting of expansions and compressions of air. Remove the air and there's nothing to expand and to compress. Now here's where it gets interesting. Light is also a wave.
Now this is a deception. He is deliberately withholding information, distorting information to make it more acceptable, and systematically lying to the cult members. This jump, as light as a wave, is skipping almost 200 years of thought on the Bell experiment. 200 years of completely different and random assertions and hypotheses and testing and experimentation, till we one day, finally, after years and years and years of fighting, come to conclude that light is a transverse wave.
Yet we're still able to see the bell after the air is sucked out. Light waves are still reaching us through the air. If light is not a wave of air, though, then what's waving?
At the time that the bell jar experiment is conducted, it is 100% conceptualized that light is a particle, not a wave, or actually, more accurately, was called a corpuscular. This corpuscular is a particle, and like the bell in the vacuum existing just fine despite no air medium, why can't a particle of light exist in the vacuum? This is not even to argue that the space is or must be empty, containing nothingness, but simply that light was conceptualized essentially as tiny, tiny, tiny grains of sand, objects, material bodies, and therefore it does not need a medium to exist in, as it is not seen as a phenomena of the medium like waves are in water or sound is in air. It is like a baseball in water or air or space. It doesn't need the medium to exist as it is. It can't exist without being somewhere, but it does not require the air to be the thing that forms the ball. It does not need the space to be the thing that forms the ball. It is the ball moving through space. Likewise, light was visualized kind of like a tiny baseball. So there was no need to conceptualize some sort of ether until Hooke says that maybe light is a spring. A spring in what? The springs then start becoming the ether. But then there's 100 other ethers, some which are tiny little vortex water spinning waves, some of which are hard solid matter, some of which are made of crystal. There is so many different ethers that to go between it's either no ether or the luminiferous ether is to drop all context of almost 2,000 years of physics history, which is quite deceptive if you ask me.
Clearly, there must be something left in the jar, even after we've apparently removed everything from it. Whatever this something is, it must be everywhere, since light can travel everywhere, even in the vast emptiness between the stars. This stuff, whatever it is, has historically been called the ether.
First, the fact that the bell exists in the jar without air proves that material bodies do not need air to exist. So why does that not apply to light if light is also conceptualized at this point as material bodies? The alternative opposite to that is to take it to the extreme other side and say that the bell is a different type of wave. In which case, what are objects? Why are they concrete when we know that they are just Heraclitean states of becomingness? Second, it is well established that the fact that the stars are far away and that you have to travel through space to reach them means that space exists and has properties, like the fact that you have to travel through it one section at a time. It has not yet been established that light is necessarily a wave, especially in this video. Yes, today it is conceptualized that light is a wave, but that conclusion was formed from the fact that imagining space as an ether was a complete, total failure.
Now, you may be aware of certain arguments against the ether, and I'll address them in a moment, but for now, let me show you just how important this really is.
So first and foremost, let's go through the byte model criteria to see what we just ran into. 1. The minimizing or discouragement of access to non-cult sources of information, including internet, TV, radio, books, articles, newspapers, magazines, media. B. Critical information. Point 2. The rejection of rational analysis, critical thinking, and constructive criticism. Point 3. Labeling alternative belief systems as illegitimate, evil, or not useful. The major one that he turns to here is not useful, despite the fact that we use GPS and other quantum particles and other quantum computing systems and totally quantum-based everything, essentially, at this point in day and age. Everything at this point is general relativity, special relativity, or quantum. And yet, we're being told that the ether needs to be researched because we are currently not doing useful science, which is a complete, utter lie. This is the labeling of a belief system as not useful. His will be useful. That's the idea. And finally, point 4. The use of loaded language and cliches which constrict knowledge, stop critical thoughts, and reduce complexities into platitudinous buzzwords. The fact of the matter is that it is not at all important. It was removed from importance once it had been demonstrated to be a complete failure, and a new conceptualization made sense of what old terminology was unable to handle, mostly due to the baggage that the concept of ether brings with it.
To do that, I'm going to give you a brief survey of all of the physical phenomena that we're aware of so far. First, observations of quantum phenomena have shown us that the particles that make up matter, say protons, neutrons, electrons, are all somehow wave-like, or they have a field-type nature. So for example, if you shoot electrons through a pair of slits, they will interact with one another in the same way that waves do.
This point completely undermines his entire argument, as there is no reason to assume that objects necessarily create a field or ether, that they do not need to be phenomena of a waving medium. They can just be stuff. That's not to say that they are not made of fields of some sort, but the history of physics had to go through a process of testing those ideas and finding them to be true or not true before coming to quantum field theory. And this quantum field theory, which he is mentioning right now, rests on all of the ideas that Inductica himself denies even exists. But he is now using the cream that is formed at the top of this theory in order to take stabs at the foundation of the theory. This is a frozen abstraction fallacy and a stolen concept fallacy.
Number 2, the strong, weak, and electromagnetic interactions, certain forces between matter, are also mediated by particles. Photons mediate the electromagnetic force, gluons mediate the strong force, etc. These particles also have a wave-like or field-like nature.
Again, this is an example of using quantum field theory in order to come back and later debunk quantum field theory. It's a frozen abstraction fallacy. And further, you do not need an interaction medium. That is just an arbitrarily made ether that makes no sense, and no one talks about it like that. This completely made up on his own terms in order to try and force his point through.
Thirdly, gravity is also a field, creating an attractive force as well as changing length and time measurements. And as the LIGO experiment recently discovered, there can even be waves of gravitation.
And yet, one more time, this is general relativity being used to later come back to debunk general relativity. This is a frozen abstraction fallacy, and the LIGO experiment shows that the field exists. So, take that as you will.
This short but broad list exhausts all of physics.
Says who? How does this short list exhaust physics? Which physics? Are we talking about quantum field theory still? This is again just an arbitrary claim in order to try and trick you.
All known physical phenomena are simply combinations of these fields.
Not even sure that that's true, as one of these fields he invented, the interaction one, and we also know that quantum and general relativity don't play together. So what is this claim?
A hydrogen atom, for example, is a proton field surrounded by an electron field.
Again, do we even know if this is true or not? The only way for us to actually know that would be to delve into quantum field theory, which this video is trying to debunk. So where does this information even come from on his side?
So apparently, all physical phenomena are fields. Now, what is a field?
Talking about fields is essentially the highest level of conceptualization in physics and mathematics. And as such, to speak of it in the manner in which James does, we can only assume that he is doing so to confuse an audience uneducated in upper-level university courses, or he himself does not understand the complexity of the subject.
A field is a property with different quantities at different locations.
This is, in fact, a straight-up lie. James and James alone is the only person to have ever defined a field as only a property. This is the use of cult-generated information and propaganda. This is the minimization or discouragement of non-cult sources. This is trying to keep the members busy so they don't have time to think and investigate themselves. This is deception. This is requiring an internalization of the group's doctrine as true. This is the adopting of the group's map of reality as reality. There is nothing about this statement which is true in reality. No one but James defines it this way, and he only defines it this way because he needs to. Let me show you, historically, what a field really is. The scientists and philosophers of the last 2,000 years were attempting to get rid of this action at a distance, using the ether as some sort of mechanism, which was getting more and more complex. By this time, Faraday had held an entirely different view of that ether. No longer believing, like the others, that it was composed of particulate matter, but rather that the ether was the field which was capable of supporting the tension of electricity and magnetism's lines of force. The work of Faraday led to the work of James Clerk Maxwell. 14 years before the famous Michelson-Morley experiment conclusion, in 1873, James Clerk Maxwell had just completed his treatise on electricity and magnetism. Maxwell's treatise refrained from making claims about the ether, stating within, quote, "These and many other phenomena of electrical discharge are exceedingly important, and when they are better understood, they will probably throw great light on the nature of electricity as well as the nature of gases and of the medium pervading space. At present, however, they must be considered outside the domain of the mathematical theory of electricity." Maxwell, like Faraday and Newton before him, did not want to lose the facts of reality to speculations on the ether, and therefore none of them came to anything but physical truths to construct their mathematical formulations. All of Maxwell's equations are derived from physical observations, and the equations explain how the fields of force are constructed as demonstrated by the physical experiments that defined them. The addition of the Lorentz force law completed the understanding, as the force law explains how these fields will affect the things within them. Maxwell therefore showed how objects in the field create forces, and how those forces would in turn affect the objects in the field. Let us get a better idea of what a field is. A field is an abstract idea that says there can be assigned a value for each point in space and time. This value represents some physical quantity. For example, we can take a room and divide it up into imaginary boxes of equal volume. Say each box is 1 cubic foot, meaning extends 1 foot east to west, extends 1 foot north to west, and extends 1 foot ground to ceiling. If the room is 1,000 cubic feet, 10 feet in each direction, then there are 1,000 imaginary boxes stacked 10 by 10 by 10. This room can be said to become a field when we put a thermometer inside every box. The field in this case would be a scalar temperature field. The values at each point in the space of the room would be the temperature at that specific location, and those temperature readings would change over time. We can also stick other measuring devices in each box, like a gravity detector, an electromagnetic detector, a photon detector, a wind speed detector, and so on. Each of these detectors would register some physical quantity, which is the result of having received energy from the environment. The field of forces of gravity would have vectors which point in the direction of the Earth. The electromagnetic detector would register some electric and magnetic fields of force, etc. The fields, then, are just our way of dividing up space and time so that we can understand what each point in space and time is experiencing at any given moment. Faraday's lines of force require time to propagate, and Maxwell helps explain this with a real example. An electric current can cause a magnetic field to appear, but it doesn't have to be an electric current. A time-varying electric field, a short vibration in the electric field, can also cause a time-varying magnetic field, a short vibration in the magnetic field. And a time-varying magnetic field can cause a time-varying electric field. And this self-propagating electromagnetic field can be written as a wave equation, and the speed of this wave happens to be the same as the speed of light. Leading to the conclusion, quote, "The agreement of the results seems to show that light and magnetism are affections of the same substance, and that light is an electromagnetic disturbance propagated through the field according to electromagnetic laws." From this, we can conclude that light is an electromagnetic energy disturbance in the electromagnetic field. Conclusion: that which exists where nothing isn't.
For example, the electromagnetic field is a property which determines how much force a charged object will experience at a given location. So a field's a property.
Deception: a field is a field. The field either is the thing or the field is merely measuring the thing. A charged particle moving through the field can be spoken about such that one says something along the lines of, "The electron field at this point is Q." This could either mean that the field is an entity of some kind and has this property at this location of its being, or we could say that the field is just our means of measuring the movements of a charged particle, a real material object, without having to track individual particles.
Now, think of it this way. A property must be a property of something.
This is the use of loaded language to stop critical thought. It is the field itself. He has removed the genetic basis of the field, and he is either lying or he is terribly mistaken.
Nothing doesn't have properties, so there must be something, some medium that exists everywhere. That's the argument for the ether.
The ether to James is the fields by a different name. In fact, James is engaging in the very activity he claims to reject. He claims to reject two major factors of science, the hypothetical deductive method and epicycles. An epicycle was when the scientists wanted to stick to the old words and old world. And so instead of changing their paradigm to match reality and new experiments, they just redefined what they meant by celestial objects, and by orbiting and rotating and adding new physical models on top of the gaps of the old. This is James and his ether, clinging to the old world and the old word, refusing to change his mind, forcing new definitions. Such that, to agree with him, would require that you change your definition of entity, property, space, time, physics, mathematics, etc. Now, I hope I don't get in trouble for this, but I'm going to share a short clip from a different YouTuber, Creaky Blinder, the purpose of which is that you will now go and watch his video as a pairing to the tasting of this video, in order to see some comparison between the work of Matt Powell and Inductica.
Think about it. They believe that the world created itself from literally nothing.
No serious cosmologists, no reputable physicists, and certainly no atheist worth their salt asserts that the universe popped into existence from a state of absolute philosophical, there was literally not a single thing at all, nothingness. That's just your misunderstanding, or more likely misrepresentation, of quantum mechanics, spacetimes, and the very early universe.
Existence University is committed to free minds and to the highest quality of content, and as such, we will never take government or corporate financial support. The following is brought to you by Existence University merchandise, available at the Patreon page You Exist, and also by donations through PayPal or Patreon by viewers like you. Thank you.